Today, I want to talk about issues in conversation in Asperger's syndrome, particularly issues at work with conversation. And it's about, as usual, it's about what I experience. It's not exactly advice. I'm just basically describing the kinds of things that I deal with when I'm at work and having conversation, or partly conversation in general as well. Okay, so as a high-functioning Aspie, I have to allocate a fair amount of brain power just trying to think of what is appropriate to say in various social situations. I usually default to silence when I can't think of anything that seems appropriate. This can be a problem in conversation when people may not understand why I suddenly don't have anything to say. On the other hand, it often seems like some conversations are going on and on with total inanity. For example, like a long goodbye scenario for no good reason at all. In both cases, I may start feeling desperate, like I've got to get out of there, but I know I have to control my reactions so as not to unduly upset the other person. Neurotypicals may pick up rapidly that something is wrong. I may pick up if something with them seems unusual as well, but that doesn't bother me very much, whereas neurotypicals will appear far more bothered by strangeness. For me, if someone is strange, it is often a good sign that they will be a more interesting person. Anyway, I have tried to restrict the amount of nonverbal information I'm sending out, since it seems that erring on the side of too little is better than too much. I try to keep my hands down, off my face, not wrinkle my forehead too much, um, not rub my lips together, things like that. These are things I've had to work on since an early age, perhaps since around age 8 or 10, and I'm still not totally successful at curbing them. If I can keep the conversation off to the side, like if I have a computer in front of me at work, then I don't have to worry so much about what my eyes are doing. If I'm facing the person, sometimes I will end up locking eyes with them, which is risky because they may do something then with their eyes that I'm supposed to respond to. But I will still be there staring at them the same way back. Then I will consciously move my eyes to the side or try to focus on something else. If I'm too addled, like if the conversation is causing a multitasking issue, or if I'm being corrected at work by someone, I will blank my mind and try to wait it out till they have gone away and I can get a better handle on things alone and think through whatever it was and try to resolve it in my own way. I've learned a lot about workplace conversation after working in offices during the past 35 years. When I first started doing temporary work after I left music school, I said very, very little. The kinds of conversations I was used to having, usually about music or issues related to music, or issues of things like existential angst, were not appropriate topics in these venues. People did not want to hear about my music practice, how I didn't practice long enough and was upset because I was sounding bad, etc. Later on, after I'd studied psychology and biology, I realized that nobody wanted a lecture on Bio 101 either. I began to listen carefully to what other people were saying in the offices so I could get a handle on this small talk thing. I noticed it was relatively important to say hi or hello or good morning to people. There's a pretty high priority on greetings in offices. If there was some holiday or knew that they had gone on a vacation trip, this was an acceptable topic to bring up, like, how was your trip? What did you see? If they had had some social gathering, you could ask how that went. If you know they have kids, you can ask how the kids are doing, how so-and-so's birthday was, etc. Pets are often a good topic since this is one area that many Aspies tend to genuinely relate to. If your coworker is into arts and crafts, this is another area that you can talk about. There is often a high priority on team sports in offices, which is a topic I have no interest in or knowledge of. So if a coworker comes up to me and asks something like, did you see blah, blah, blah in the eighth? Did you see what he did? I will often just apologize right there and say something like, wow, I don't know anything about baseball, sorry. It's important for me to nip the sports thing in the bud because they could get into a long description of some kind, and at the end I will be a total blank, which I'm sure is disconcerting to the person doing the talking. I found that asking open-ended questions about team sports doesn't really work because they are trying to express something else. It's like if I said, "Did you hear the way he finished up the E-Bear concerto with that high F?" Well, I'm probably not going to want to be describing the half-whole fingering for that particular note on the flute and why it was so special the way the guy nailed it or fluffed it. Either you get it or you don't. And with sports, I just don't get it. There are a couple of questions at work I had been tuning out until recently, things that I couldn't remember because they just didn't register with me at all. One has to do with, so what did you eat for lunch? Now, it would never have occurred to me until recently to ask anyone this question. If I knew someone went to a fancy restaurant for a big dinner the previous evening, I may then ask them what they ate, since I can infer that it was a relatively significant event in their schedule. Otherwise, it seems like a really weird question to me. So now I practice asking it once in a while if I think of it, since it seems to be part of the culture of the workplace. Another question that is often asked is, when did you come in? Or how long are you here till? These are also questions that never would have occurred to me, but they are commonly asked. People want to know who they will be working with and for how long on their shift. Or maybe they're just asking it for something to say. Empathy is usually a problem for Aspies. While I was studying psychology in the late 80s, I used to think I had great empathy. I went around practicing feeling empathic, like on buses and trains. I would practice this kind of broad, magnanimous feeling and try to project it out onto the passengers. This went along with an inflated sense I had at the time that I somehow had the answers in psychology for people's problems. Later, I realized that it was all projection, all in my head, and that it was actually far more effective to follow an empathy template, such as the peer counseling technique of focusing. In focusing, you invite the person to consider the issues that may be bothering them, put them on an imaginary shelf, look at them one by one, and then ask them to imagine how it would be if these issues were entirely lifted from them. Usually the person has a big feeling of relief with this imaginal exercise. Then you invite them to select one issue to work on and you actively listen while they talk about it. Active listening involves asking open-ended questions, paraphrasing back to the person what they have said, and summarizing what they have said. You totally avoid imposing your own opinion or pseudo-empathy. You have to listen very carefully and focus exactly on the content of what they are saying. I think that following a template like this without imposing your own opinion is a really useful skill for Aspies to learn, since you don't have to be trying to feel some kind of emotion that may not actually be present in order to do this focusing effectively. You can be quite detached and still be effective. You get used to asking open-ended questions, and this is helpful in dealing with any kind of relationship, including work relationships. I surely don't mean to start regularly asking people what is bothering them or anything like that at work. What I mean is, instead of ignoring them or telling them what you think they should do or what your opinion is, you can ask them how things are or reiterate back to them what they've said in some way so they can tell that you heard their issue. It is also a good way to avoid discussing your own issues, which may be totally misunderstood by neurotypicals. Now, in some relatively relaxed work situations, you may find that more or less diversity in conversational topics is present, and some challenge, opinion, joking, and teasing seems to be allowed. However, many Aspies, myself included, find that it is way too easy to say the wrong thing at work. Therefore, if I'm working in, say, a law office, I may find that after a few months there, I'm tempted to say things that are just a little too honest, a little too blunt, a little too jokey, a little too outrageous. And after a few months or a year there, I know something is wrong and I have to leave that job. In my current work, the atmosphere is more tolerant of diversity, and a certain amount of body camaraderie is the norm. I still have to watch out, though. Not too long ago, I was not able to stop myself from a totally non-PC rejoinder joke to something that someone else said. It just fit too well. It was too perfect, and I was compelled to say it. Later, I apologized to the person I had made the joke about, but it did remind me that I have to curb my puns, jokes, and bluntness because they are easily misunderstood. I really do want everything to go smoothly in the workplace, and I don't want to have a bad effect on my workmates. I should mention that sometimes this analysis all becomes moot. That is, when the conversational noise at work reaches such a level that I'm unable to focus on anything at all. It all begins to sound kind of like an orchestral version of a Charlie Brown TV special when the adults are talking in surround sound. At these times, I have to focus the best I can on the mechanics of my job and hope that no one talks to me. Finally, I want to mention one other type of communication issue that I have found comes up occasionally. The way I perceive this particular type of communication is, it feels like a demand is being placed on me for something that is not there. For lack of a better way to put it, it is as if someone is trying to be sort of lovey-dovey to me and wants me to be, quote, lovey-dovey back to them. It is clear that if I do not complete this exchange in some way, they are disappointed. However, to provide what they seem to be seeking would basically be a behavioral lie on my part. Most Aspies hate lying, and we will do a lot to avoid lying. Here is the rub. It is not that I don't like the person. I appreciate them, I respect them, I may consider them a friend, etc. But I'm honestly not feeling sentimental or affectionate, and I don't want to pretend that I'm feeling sentimental or affectionate. This may involve them expecting hugs, and I generally just don't feel huggy. I feel that if I know someone, then I know a lot of details about them. I know their interests. I can predict their behavior. I remember what they've told me, etc. However, they may have forgotten every single thing I've ever told them, misconstrue all my motivations, and keep telling me I should be some other way than I am. But they still want to be huggy and sentimental. I just don't get it. I don't have a good answer for how to deal with this. Sometimes I just say, "Ah," and try to leave it at that. They can interpret that as they will. I have not figured out a good strategy for navigating this particular challenge. And on that note, this is the end of this video. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye for now.